Okay, are we going?
We're already rolling.
Oh, we're already rolling. Got it. Hey guys, welcome to Real Sales Dynamics, where we break down in-field solar door knocking footage in order to make you a better closer. Today we're going to be talking about 6 different tips when you are choosing to jump into the solar industry. We've already made a couple videos on how much money you can actually make in this industry, which is a lot. A big portion of that, though, has to do with the company that you're working for at that time. Now, even if you're in the worst possible company in the world, if you're selling 100, 200 accounts a year, it's basically impossible to not end up becoming rich through this job. But what we're looking for is, how do you get your best return on your investment? And that starts with, first step, how are they training you guys? As soon as you get on board with a solar company, you want to make sure that there's a person there who's leading from the front, whether it's a manager or the actual owners of the company, who have actually been in the field, know what it's like to door knock in your area, and then can teach you those skill sets. When you ask a question, the response should not always be, you don't need to know that yet. Because what happens is that a lot of these solar companies, especially small ones, they'll just hire you to be what they call a setter. Now, in certain markets, like in California, where you have to wait a long time to get a home improvement sales license, it makes sense that it takes maybe 2 to sometimes 4 months in order to move on to closing your own deals. But there's some companies that abuse that system, where they just try to get you, they'll give you a little 2-second pitch to just try and go get some leads for them, and they pay you a small amount of money so they can get the biggest rip on the entire deal. Are they setting you up, live up to your absolute potential, or are they not really teaching you much at all, and you're just constantly left having that horrible feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing? Myself personally, I've sold thousands of deals in solar, but I wasn't competent at it until I could understand it completely. And at that point, then that confidence and conviction comes because you have the belief in what you're doing. The second step, learn how your solar company works. Namely, how they work with installation partners. Some companies, you'll have a sales company A, and they only work with install company B. Other companies have A, and then they work with A, B, C, D, E, and F. And the reason why you'll have those broker companies where they're working with multiple install companies is, let's say one of the installers starts slowing down, or loses inventory, or gets shut down, or 1,000 other things that can possibly happen. What occurs then is that you end up not being able to provide the best customer experience, or maybe the best rep experience as a whole. Let's say your team sold too many deals in 1 month, and now they're pushed back 6 months. Versus when you're working with a broker company, you're able to be a bit more nimble. Stating that, when you're working with a broker company, there's generally more to learn. Everything has a positive and negative on it. When you're working with a broker company, you're gonna have to learn the tools that these various install companies use. So there's a bit more unexpected snafus that can occasionally occur as a result. And that's why, again, it's so integral that if you're working with a broker company, that their training is on point. Then they can teach you how to go from A to Z with any installer selling in any state that you're selling in at that particular time. Number 3, learn how you get paid. And there's a good rule of thumb with this. The simpler it is to understand, the less likely you're gonna end up getting screwed over by, let's say, a sales company. Traditionally in solar, what happens is you have what's called a red line or a baseline model. Let's say I have this cell phone right here and it's $1,000. Anything I sell above that, I make that money. That's how traditional red line or baseline works, where you have, let's say, a red line of $2.50. You sell a deal for $3.50. You would make $1,000 a kilowatt on that deal. The difficulty comes, and this is mostly for people who are closing their own deals, and when companies decide to try to advertise for low red lines or low baseline, and what ends up coming out of it is they'll go, well, you have this red line, but you have a 70-30 split, where you only get 70% of the amount of money on that deal. Gets confusing. And on top of that, they'll add these things called adders, where let's say you have panels going on one roof, then another, right? 3 different roof planes. They'll charge you for everything that's involved there. Once even more, there's companies that'll actually charge you an adder or an extra fee for using their base normal panel. So the red lines that they're promising you aren't actually true. There's one other little key thing, and I'm trying to keep it simple for you guys to keep in mind though, is when you are looking at a company and trying to figure out how much money you're gonna make, take a look at finance partners that they're using. Every finance partner has different finance charges, or what they're called dealer fees on deals. Essentially what happens is this: I'm a loan company and the inflation rate's 10%, and I'm giving you an interest rate of 4%, I'm just gonna lose money on that deal, right? Because as the dollar gets weaker, my interest is too low. So the solar companies then add a dealer fee or an adder fee on top of those loans. Generally, the higher risk a candidate is, let's say their credit score is like a 600, then that finance company will have higher dealer fees and higher financing charges. The tricky little thing is that there's some install companies who add on additional costs on those fees in order to make a quick buck. You might think, hey, I have the best red line in the world, but when I look at the actual numbers, because the finance charges and adders are so high, you end up making significantly less money than expected. Hunter, who's been on a couple of videos before, worked for another solar company. When we broke down all the numbers, he had like this right around the same red line as us. We worked out the numbers that he would have made about $200,000 more than with us over the course of a year, because we're from the solar industry, so we know how to negotiate with installers to get the best possible numbers without any little hidden charges in it. Next up, learn how the solar process works. In most cases, if your installer is installing legally, by the way, keep in mind, some installers install without permits. Really bad idea, and it's a good way to go out of business and end up with some really heavy lawsuits. Anyway, when a customer signs up with you, let's say they sign their loan docs and their install agreement, generally what occurs is either yourself do a site inspection of the home, or you have a site inspector comes out to the house. After that, that information gets sent over to engineers. The engineers then work on it so they can make sure that the panels are in the correct place, and they are able to figure out if the person needs a main panel upgrade, other additional features onto the system in order to ensure that the system is going to work properly. Sometimes that triggers what's called a final design or a change order, but if everything in that deal is good to go, generally gets sent out to a permitting department. The permitting times vary depending on the counties that you're in. It's always a good idea to actually check in to make sure that what your install company is telling you is true when it comes to permits. A classic way that install companies will delay a project because they just forgot about it is blame it on permits. There's many areas of the country where you can get permits in the same day as you submit them. After the permits are back, then you go ahead and install the system. Once the system's installed, generally inspectors come out to the area, they make sure everything's good to go and it matches up with the permit. Then the system gets turned on. After activation, which is PTO, depending on your utility, customer most likely doesn't receive any utility bill at all if they did the job correctly, or maybe a small fee depending. And then they just have the solar payment, and now they have a small utility bill. What's important when choosing a company, figuring out how long does it take for a system to actually get turned on? Because there's certain areas that I found where installers will install a system quickly, but it'll take 6 months for the system to get turned on. Issue is that the customer's already paying on the loan before the system's even turned on. That's how you end up with really annoyed customers. That can be a bit of an issue. You tend to find this in a lot of cases with companies who are offering very, very low red line. The less you're paying the installers and everyone involved, the more likely that they're using subcontractors on their jobs. If they're using subcontractors rather than the actual people who work for them, you're less likely to be able to retain good quality. Now that there's more and more different people involved in the project, less likely things are going to move smoothly. So it's not always about necessarily getting paid the most, but also how do I continue to get paid through referrals. If your company isn't well reviewed, if there's not very good reviews online, or if there's just repeated bad customer experiences, you're less likely to get referrals. If you don't get a lot of referrals in, then you're going to spend a lot more time pounding the pavement. And while you're pounding the pavement, you're going to be getting calls from angry customers, which is just going to make your life a lot more stressful. Really make sure you learn how a deal actually goes from, meeting a complete stranger to them becoming your friend, to them signing up and getting you referrals, and make sure that process is as smooth as possible. You have to take your own responsibility in it, but if you find this to be a consistent issue, you may want to look around at another company. Okay, next up, guys, what's your motivation? There's certain reps out there who do best in the Wolf of Wall Street, throwing midgets across the room type of environment where everyone's ooh-rah and screaming and everything else. The thing about offices like that, and that's great if that's your thing, but in order to pay for all those things, they tend to pay you a little bit less. But again, if that's your motivation, that's great, right? What you just have to keep in mind is that in those huge environments, it's very, very, very easy to get lost when you first jump in. Big companies like that tend to have a retention rate of about 10%. I've seen the numbers before. There's probably going to be less people who are great at selling who are going to be able to spend that time with you. Then there's other folks who work really well in smaller sales environments where they can play a part in it potentially as a managerial role within a couple months, rather than in huge companies where you might have to wait 3 or 4 years or until someone dies in order to be able to step up into management. So knowing your place in that and what's internally motivating you in order to do really, really well in the solar industry will help you out tremendously in your solar sales career. What I found personally was that solar was the first environment in which I did really, really well in sales because most of the people around me were very positive. Never come from that, not in mortgages, flooring sales, credit card transactions machines, or any of those. There was a lot of positivity there. So if you're in a positive environment where people aren't constantly complaining, you're most likely going to be doing a lot better at this job. Lastly here, I'm going to leave you guys with some red flags. Most of the things I've been talking to you about, there's a cost-benefit analysis in all these different options. If as soon as you get hired, someone mentions to you, we should sell your friends and family without teaching you how to actually sell any solar, that person's trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to take advantage of you because they don't believe that you're capable of actually being able to do this job. So they want to get the lowest hanging fruit from you as possible from the get-go. You know, do 3 to 5 deals with this person, and then suddenly I'm going to start making money. Another red flag to look at is with escalated pay scales. So what I mean by this is, let's say you're with a company who goes, for your first 10 deals that you're self-generating, right? You knock the door, you self-generate the sale, you close it, you get it to installation. We're going to pay you 30% of what you should be paid for this, but after number 11, suddenly out of nowhere, we'll start paying you a lot more money. The reason for this is that in large-scale, big companies, we don't need to mention them, the retention rate is so low that your average rep ends up only doing 6 to 8 because people fall through the cracks in those companies. So what they're trying to do is make as much money on you as they can. Something to look out for is, does the company believe in volume over margin? There's 2 different views on this. The company can either make as much money off one rep as they possibly can at the very beginning, and then they leave to another company, or do they believe in volume, in which case they have such belief in their training capabilities and in their vetting processes, they believe that their reps will be able to hold a minimum of at least 3 to 5 sales every single month. Those are key things you're going to want to be listening out for. Another thing to look out for when starting in the solar industry is that unfortunately some companies run like this. They'll tell you, well, you're right here, but the way you make your real money is if you get other people underneath you who can start selling, and you'll make money off them. And then underneath them, they'll start making money, right? And so they'll bring in their recruits, and then they start bringing in their recruits, right? Now, this is all part of a bigger system. Very few people are actually going to be able to make money on any one of these deals because there's so many people barreled up on top of this isosceles. No one is really making money off of self-generated sales. This tends to bring in the worst type of recruiters and the worst types of salespeople because the people can actually sell themselves out of a paper bag, tend to leave those really, really quickly. That doesn't work out in the long run and ends up screwing over a lot of different people. This job, and this should be really, really clear to everyone here, is not for everyone. There is only a small amount of people who are going to be good at negotiating, knocking doors, breaking preoccupation, and being able to handle the complicated issues that arise in this industry. Don't let anyone ever trick you into believing that anyone at all can become an amazing door knocker. You are paid in direct proportion to the problems that you're capable of solving. So always keep that in mind no matter what big promises they make you. So you got to figure out exactly where most of that money is actually going. It should probably be to the guy selling the deal. And that about wraps it up, guys. Again, make sure you're really out there, you're learning stuff, you're researching as much as you can about the solar industry as a whole. If you're interested in working with a solar broker company who makes sure that we train our reps and host boot camps regularly, we are hiring in Tampa, Orlando, Miami, San Diego, LA, San Francisco. We are now picking up install partners in Houston, Texas for those Houston guys who've been chatting with us a lot. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Make sure to click down below in the little submission form so that we can add you in potentially one of these boot camps in the future. And make sure to click subscribe. 80% of you guys don't. Make sure to watch one of these 2 videos. YouTube thinks you're gonna like it a lot.